Hello, 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 and welcome to a starting step series for Sweden in Victoria 3. Previously, I did a starting step series for Congo and showed how you take a small country and build up your first 50 construction sectors sustainably. In this series, we're going to take a mid-tier country and take them through their first 30 years. Really the first 31 years, as you can see from the date. In this series, we're not looking for aggressive expansion, but more concerned with building up our economy to a point where we can enter the mid-game with a starting foundation that will allow for a much stronger GDP growth going forward. There will be some war in this series, but it will mainly be contained to Scandinavia. You can see here where we're going to end. We'll take the run to December 1st, 1867, and finish with 172 construction points, entering the mid-game as a great power ranked 6th. In the conclusion of the final video, I'll go into where you go from this point, but before we get there, let's see how we get here. We start with one construction sector in Svealand on iron frame buildings. We have 15 construction points because of it. However, we start on interventionism, which means when the private sector starts building, we're going to share 50% of our construction points with them. We want to maintain a base of 10 construction points, so we need to start by building a second construction sector. To maintain 2 construction sectors on iron frame buildings, we'll need 100 iron, 80 wood, 40 fabric, and 20 tools. One level of iron mine makes 20 units of iron. We have 5 iron mines already built, so there's our 100 units of iron right there. However, you can see we are trading away all of it. So the next thing we're going to do is put a high subvention on the export of iron so we can keep it. You can see Svealand has a surplus of 152 wood, so we don't need to build that. However, we do have a deficit of 51 tools. One tooling workshop will make 60 tools, so we'll add one of them. We currently have a deficit of 125 fabric in Svealand, and this is mainly due to the fact that not only do we not have any livestock ranches built, but our country has no access to cotton. So the first tech we're going to research is intensive agriculture, so we can get more fabric out of our livestock ranches. You can see once we get that, we'll get 15 units of fabric per level. Right now, one level only gets us 5 units. We'll start off by building 5 livestock ranches. This won't cover everything, but we don't want to cover it all with ranches because each level employs 5,000 people. We don't want to tie up all our workers in the livestock ranches. This is a short-term solution. The next thing we'll do is add a small subvention on the import of fabric. But we don't want to rely forever on imports. The Niger Delta and Togo have access to cotton plantations, along with many other resources we can use. We want to start a colony in each so that we can bring cotton plantations into our market. So first thing we'll add is an interest in the region. Next, we'll have to pass a colonization law. Since this colony is going to focus on bringing resources into our market, we want that plus 20% throughput bonus for plantations in unincorporated states. To enact colonial exploitation, we need the armed forces in government. So let's bring the armed forces in. You can see it actually brought our legitimacy up a little bit. Let's enact colonial exploitation. Lastly, we'll add 1 coal mine in Scania. When we start needing more iron, we can activate the atmospheric engine pump, which will need coal. This is what our initial construction queue will look like. One benefit we have is that at game start, our investment pool has no money, so they can't start building anything at the first unpause. They'll have to build up at least 50k before they can do anything. So when we unpause, we will actually have the full 15 construction points to work with, and once the construction sector finishes, the full 20 points until they start building. We start with a decent interest rate. We can afford to go into a little bit of debt. We don't want to go too far, but if we do dip into debt a little bit, we'll be okay. Especially since we'll have some buildings to sell to the private sector at some point. As for tech, we've already added intensive agriculture. After that, we'll add modern sewage. This will add +1 infrastructure per 100k population. This is actually one of the most important techs in the game. You can see in Svealand, we only have 7 infrastructure left to spare. We need more, but we don't have railroads at start. We can build a port to add a little bit more to our tally here, but ports are expensive and we'll probably need to subsidize it. We have a population of 1.11 million in the state, so we get one infrastructure per 100,000 pops. That means modern sewage will add 11 infrastructure for no cost, and that number will go up as our population does. Considering many of our important states are near their infrastructure cap, we need to go for this tech sooner rather than later. Then we'll go for railways for the same reason we're going for modern sewage. Next, we want water tube boiler to increase our resource output with the condensing engine pump. We'll go for canneries next. It'll allow us to use meat in our food industries. This will help us keep our livestock ranches as profitable as possible, since they're our only internal source of fabric. Next, we'll add general staff and field works. These are very necessary military techs if you're going to do anything with your military. However, at game start we're pretty safe, so we can hold off for a little bit. I haven't added joint stock companies yet. This will give us access to another company. However, I want our second company to be LKAB, which I'll talk about next. But to get that, we need open hearth process. After fieldworks, we'll work our way through the level 2 production techs so we can get to open hearth process. It's very possible we'll get joint stock companies from tech spread before we get down to open hearth process. We have access to a company at game start, so we're going to start with Swedish Metals. It's always beneficial to start with this company as it helps you get your construction sectors going quicker. The throughput bonus to iron mines allows you to produce more metal for the same number of workers, making metal cheaper and allowing you to have more money in your budget and more construction sectors. Generally, when you're on iron frame buildings, the iron is the most expensive input since it's the resource you need the most of. We'll also be able to add coal mines to the company as well. On top of that, once we reach prosperity, we'll get a plus 10% throughput bonus to steel mills. The one difficulty with this is Sweden has a unique company called LKAB, which not only produces iron, but can produce a prestige iron as well. You can also add steel mills to the company. However, once again, you need to research open hearth process in order to get it, which is going to take us some time. What we're going to do is start with the metals company and use that in the meantime to build up our construction sectors. Once we research open hearth process, we'll disband the metals company and create LKAB. When you disband a company, their buildings get transferred to the local workforce. If we immediately add LKAB, they will buy up the iron mines from the local workforce. So let's add Swedish Metals. We'll add road maintenance to Svealand since we're building there right now. And we'll get added state construction efficiency. However, Scania, our lone source of coal, which we're going to need very soon, is under its infrastructure, so we'll add road maintenance there as well. Our states with significant population are Svealand, Jutland, and Scania, so we'll add promote social mobility to each of those. Lastly, we'll add encourage agricultural industry to Svealand to get an added throughput to our livestock ranches there in order to get more fabric. We'll take this away once we research intensive agriculture. This will leave us with a surplus of 283 authority, giving us a negative 12% enactment time on laws, which is a decent amount. Next thing we'll do is up our taxes. Normally, I don't like to go above medium as it lowers legitimacy, raises the expected standard of living, and increases radicals. But we are going to have expensive construction goods for a period of time. Once we get through our initial build queue, we can bring them back down. We need to add the rest of our strategic interests. We have 3 more. Looking at fabric on the world market, the United States and Great Qing are the biggest exporters. So we'll add an interest in both of them so we can add to our trade advantage with them. You can see we have a lot of wood and hardwood. We want our wood for our construction sectors, but we can benefit from exporting the hardwood. It looks like we're already exporting it to Qing and Great Britain. We already added an interest to Great Qing for the fabric, so that will help us here as well. So the last interest we'll add is with Great Britain. We'll also increase relations with Great Britain. France is protective of us, so we'll increase relations there. And when our interest in New England activates, we'll increase relations with the United States. Now we're ready for... And away we go. So now our New England interest is activated. So we'll begin improving relations with the United States. Through the widespread introduction of the atmospheric engine in the mining industry, productivity is at an all-time high. So the throughput bonuses are nice, but we would rather get tech spread, and we need to get to railways sooner rather than later. We can get tech spread on the water tube boiler, which is nice, but we'll go to railways first. So now that this company owns 5 levels of iron mines, you can see we're getting a 72% throughput bonus, which has added a significant amount of iron to our market. You can see it didn't initially allow us to add the subvention to or add the tariff to the export, and that's because we can't change anything until April 1st. However, now we don't really need to. It's good that we're exporting that iron for now, and so now we have a surplus of it because of the throughput bonus from the company. All right, so we can see now the private sector has started to build, and so the company's building iron in northern Norway, which is fine. Frustrated with the lengthy legal process surrounding colonial exploitation, Magnus Brahe of the Armed Forces has approached us with an offer to expedite the process, utilizing his personal connections within the state apparatus. So we can see the rural folk are actually already pretty upset. I would like to get them off of old ways because we really need tech spread right now. Normally I would take this first one, but we can go with the negative 10% enactment time in order to not get the rural folk any more upset, especially since we currently have a negative 13% enactment time from the excess authority. All right, law progress to consideration. So we can see in our construction sector currently, iron is pretty cheap, tools are expensive, wood is very cheap, and fabric is expensive. Now let's look at our trade center, and let's also pin it to the outlier. And so we can see we have a plus 32% trade advantage on the import of fabric, and this is despite the fact that we have a negative 25% trade advantage for imports because of mercantilism. So this is a pretty good price. Same thing with tools. We're getting plus 88%. In fact, it would be better if we could get a little bit better of a trade advantage on our export of iron. What we need is an interest in France and the Rhine. And it looks like we have additional interests we can declare. So we'll declare an interest in the Rhine, in France, and in Italy. All right, law progressed to assent. Not bad. So we have an input goods shortage somewhere. Oh, for tools for the construction sector. And over here, tools for logging. So we need some tools. Our interests have activated, so let's take a look now. And now we have a plus 2% trade advantage on iron. We actually have an excellent trade advantage on the import of wine. Yay. Otto Paunstira, the ever-officious leader of the landowners, has approached the government with a plan to enact landed voting. A successful enactment is certain to contribute to his reputation as an effective politician. Interesting. This will certainly give them more power. We are currently on oligarchy, which is giving us some extra authority, though it's also giving a lot of political strength to aristocrats. So let's take a look at this. So we're getting plus 50% political strength to aristocrats, plus 25% to capitalists, and plus 50% to officers. Right now, the aristocrats in our country are the landowners and the intelligentsia. Though it looks like the intelligentsia aren't the majority in any group, but they are some. If we go to landed voting, the aristocrats get plus 100 political strength. We'll also be giving some political strength to the clergy. Now, we do want to make the clergy happy, because in Sweden here, the Church of Sweden has for their highest happiness card their work ethic, which is going to give a plus 5% company throughput bonus. So we would like to lean into the church a little bit. However, I don't really want to go for landed voting. Oligarchy isn't great either, but I don't want to double the political strength of the aristocrats. I also don't want to go to autocracy. So if we say no, we'll lose 5 legitimacy. So that will bump us down to a contested government. So everybody over here will lose 1 happiness. And the landowners will lose 2 happiness. But they won't change off of this, so we will do that. The encouragement of agricultural development in Svealand has led to a small spike in production at our rye farms. We should look into using this before it goes to waste. Alright, 10 years of agricultural throughput. This will hopefully benefit us in some way when we get to the hungry 40s. To outside observers, the industrialists appear firmly committed to the idea of colonial exploitation, but behind this facade of unity, discord has long festered. Now, a clique of dissenters have finally had enough and have officially broken with their fellow members over the issue of reform. Well, I don't want to lose 15% enactment success chance, nor do I really want to lose 10. We don't have any setbacks, so even though the benefit here is only a plus 5% enactment success chance, and there's a variation of this where sometimes you get plus 10, we will take the setback to get the plus 5. Alright, and we have our first tooling workshop in Svealand, and it is going to hire up pretty quick. In fact, we will put this up for sale, so that the industrialists can get a little bit more wealth. In the law advance, so we get an additional 15% success chance. More pragmatically inclined members of the rural folk, currently opposed to the passing of colonial exploitation, have offered to change their stance were they to be offered certain political concessions. Such concessions would not be popular with the armed forces, however. Alright, so this one we will take. So the armed forces will lose 3 happiness with, but they're at 12 already. We don't really need patriotic fervor yet, though we'll still have it. So we will take this. And that brings us to a 47% success chance. So our next checkpoint is December 6th. You know, we did not deal with our metals company. Whoops. So let's take a look at our executive. Henrik Holmgren, an intelligentsia, basic entrepreneur, which is good. We get a plus 5% throughput bonus to their buildings. And ambitious, we get another plus 5% throughput bonus. So this is a good executive to have. Now, we do want to add an industry rights charter for coal mines. And then we will give them trade rights and investment rights. But for trade rights, I find it's best not to give trade rights until you reach prosperity. So the iron mines in Jutland have not a great productivity. Tools are expensive, so it would be helpful to build some tools here to make the iron mines a little more productive. You can always use a tooling workshop somewhere. All right, we have intensive agriculture. We are going to add increased wool gathering in all of our livestock ranches. Currently, tools are very expensive, so we're not going to go for butchering tools or slaughterhouses yet. But now that we've added intensive agriculture, we should have, yes, some fertilizer. So we have plus 17, so we can utilize that in some of our farms. All right, so we would need plus 46 for all of the farms. Now, Svealand is the place that is going to have a lot of the livestock ranches in order to provide fabric for the construction sectors. So we should utilize the fertilizer from them as well. It's only going to use 11. So we'll do that, and then the other places we'll hold off on. And grain itself is actually pretty cheap in the market right now, though the livestock ranches will use it as an input. The revolutionary events in Great Britain are inspiring radical sentiments across Europe. So we can add some pop attraction to the radical movement. This will also give us some additional radicals, which we currently right now have a little over twice as many radicals as we do loyalists, so we should keep an eye on that. Yeah, we will do the second option here. We'll get less radical movement pop attraction, but we'll also incur less radicals. Alright, and it's time for Springtime of the Peoples. Spurred by revolutionary sentiments spreading across Europe, the radical movement is becoming widespread in Sweden. Whether we support or oppose them, this heralds a time of great change and reaction. Now the thing is, with the Springtime of the Peoples, it's been revamped for 1.10, and ultimately, this is going to try to lead us off of monarchy. The problem we have is that Norway, we are the senior member in a personal union, and so essentially Norway is a subject of ours. If we abolish the monarchy, we lose them as a subject, which I don't necessarily want to do. So we might not be leaning into these radical movements in Springtime of the Peoples, which is going to create a bit of an uphill battle for this. So we can support the conservative establishment. If we support the radical movement, our intelligentsia, the leader of our intelligentsia, will change his stance to radical, which generally, the radical ideology has a lot of stuff we want to pass. We'll also gain popularity, but you see we'll gain twice as much pop attraction to all of the radical movements in the country. I would much rather try to get through this without losing our monarchy. So we'll take this first option. And so now we'll take a look at Springtime of the Peoples. Discontent with the post-Napoleonic reactionary order has exploded into a tidal wave of radical sentiment across Europe. Liberal revolutionaries hoist tricolor flags and cry out for liberty, equality, and fraternity. Barricades in Stockholm. If a liberal or socialist political movement becomes insurrectionary in Svealand, whilst this journal entry is active, revolutionary forces may attempt to seize power in the capital. So it'll complete if either Sweden has been forced to enact a democratic constitution, or any Swedish interest group is in government and has the ideology liberal or radical. So one of those two. And then also either we've enacted census suffrage or universal suffrage. And then it'll be a conservative victory if, for 12 months, support for the radical movement is below 10%. Which it is not right now, though we can suppress them. The radical movement is being suppressed, and no Swedish leader or agitator has the radical ideology. So, yeah, we'll start suppressing the radical movement. And then, if we can get them below 10% support, our 12 consecutive month timer will begin. As painful as it is to me to not support the Springtime of the Peoples. All right. And we have colonial exploitation. So let's set up our colonies. So we'll do one here in the Niger Delta, and we'll also do one in Togo. Now, it looks like we will be battling Denmark for this state, but we'll let it build up. We can also now increase our colonial affairs institution. So the landowners currently have 20% political clout. It would be nice to get to level 2 of law enforcement so that we get less state penalties from turmoil, which we're probably about to get from Springtime of the Peoples. So what we'll do is we'll wait to enact that. What we'll do first is we will go for dedicated police force, because this will get rid of the plus 5% landowners political strength, and on top of that it will also give us negative 5% radicals from political movements. We'll go with dedicated police force next. This afternoon, Anders Eriksson, leader of the Petit Bourgeoisie, delivered a fiery speech advocating for the enactment of dedicated police force. So we can give some pop attraction to the Petit Bourgeoisie and still get plus 10% enactment success chance. So we will take that. So we do need to make sure that the rural folk don't end up in government. Which... we do want to get somebody else in charge of the rural folk. We would like to make them happy because we can get some extra infrastructure from farmers markets if they are happy. So let's see if we can invite anybody. Nobody from the rural folk. We can get a market liberal industrialist, although our industrialist is already a market liberal. Law debate success. So it's increased by 10%. Now, I did say after field works, we were going to work our way through the level 2 production in order to get to open hearth process, but I did forget we do want to get quinine so that our colonies can expand faster, but that is going to add pharmaceuticals and quinine to the list here. Proponents of liberal reforms are looking to spread their ideas to our neighboring countries. So Norway will get the event Echoes of the Revolution, but the rural folk will be a little bit happier. So we'll do that. Law debate success, so we get plus 10% there. Law progress to consideration. All right, so we now have 5 fully staffed livestock ranches with intensive agriculture. So if we look at the construction sector in Svealand, it's a decent price for fabric. It's still a little expensive, but not entirely. It looks like though we could still use more tools. So we'll add a second tooling workshop. We'll finish the coal mine. We'll get the tools going in Jutland. We'll add the tooling workshop to Svealand. And then we'll add 2 more construction sectors. Now we can, it is time to start selling a building. So we'll sell the arms industries to start. Colonial affairs increased, excellent. The Dutch East Indies wants investment rights in us. We will give that to them. Now let's take a look at our company and see how our prosperity is going. So we have a maximum prosperity of 54, so we do need to work on that. And we see here, iron mines in Jutland are kind of low, and the lead mines in Svealand are very low. This is mainly because we don't really have any use of lead at the moment. So first thing we can do is pay a small subvention to maybe try to start exporting it, but also we don't have any glassworks yet, I believe, right? We do not. So we'll build one here as well. Keep an eye, yeah, we have plenty of peasants. So we'll add a glassworks here. So right after these 2 construction sectors, we'll build the glassworks, and then we'll look at any other inputs that we need for the construction sectors. Let's take a look at our private sector. We're getting farms. Okay, that's fine. Millet farms in Swedish Niger Delta. Sure, we don't want to build that ourselves, so we're good with that. The radical movement is becoming popular, uncontrollable, and violent. Calls for revolution echo in the streets. Extreme measures may be necessary. So we can get progress towards central archives and get a new journal entry called Restore Order, or just Restore Order, or Radicals. So we will take the progress and take a look at the journal entry. Desperate times call for desperate measures. With the radicals at the gates threatening to destroy traditional hierarchies, we must be prepared to use coercion to restore order. So what we need is we need to enact secret police and have home affairs at level 3. Right now we don't have home affairs at all. Now if we wanted to get that and go to level 3, our bureaucracy cost per level is not too much. We need, oh yeah, so we need central archives, that's right, in order to get this, and that's why we get the text spread on it. But we do have quite a lot to research before we're going to do that. We are down in the right level of tech for it, and we have 10 years. So we'll pin this there. Maybe we'll try to go for this. But we do want to go for all of these techs before we go for that. But it's very possible we might get this on tech spread. And now we have a uprising here of the radical movement. We can take a look to see what's making them so angry. So they don't like monarchy, they don't like oligarchy, they kind of don't like religious schools or combination acts, but it's mainly the radical supporters. We're also getting plus 15% because of insurrectionary radical movements in neighboring countries. This is something new with 1.10. And we're getting plus 17% because Springtime of the Peoples is active. Now, going to universal suffrage will make progress toward completing Springtime of the Peoples, which again, we don't really want to do. We want to stay a monarchy for now so we can keep Norway. However, we could maybe get off of oligarchy. So they are neutral on wealth voting. Census suffrage and universal suffrage are the two things that Springtime of the Peoples wants. So we could go to wealth voting. This would, though, give a lot of power to our landowners, because right now we are still a mostly an agrarian and resource-heavy society. So we'll keep an eye on this. If we can enact wealth voting, that would get rid of the plus 10% for oligarchy. We're at 78% militant right now. They're drifting toward 87%. So if we got rid of oligarchy, that would go down to 77%, as long as it doesn't get to 100. But the increase, this is going to increase radicals. And so the more radicals we get, the more the percentage numbers here from radicals will increase. Now, if we can get dedicated police force passed, this will also help us here. So we'll see what it looks like once dedicated police force passes. And there we go. Dedicated police force has passed. However, now that we have it, we can invest more, and we will do that. And so we'll just deal with it for now. So they have 5 battalions, 5 flotillas. So it's actually not a very large part of our army. So if it did go to a revolution, we would be okay. Problem is, if we let it go to the revolution, we do risk other countries getting involved in the revolution. Right, and we have power of the purse, so we now get production method in our naval bases. So we will use that. We have labor movement, so we can get another agitator in. Now, in terms of Springtime of the Peoples, we don't want to put anybody in government who has the ideology liberal or radical. That automatically gets rid of the intelligentsia, because they have liberal no matter what, regardless of their leader. The current leader of the rural folk are radical, so we could possibly get a different rural folk person in. So somebody who's a Democrat. They do endorse wealth voting, so we could possibly get this person in. Leopold Gulich, North German person. So this person will give plus 5% political movement pop attraction, and they're going to join the liberal movement. Okay. All things I normally do like, except for the fact that I don't want to get off of monarchy right now. But we will invite this person in. And so let's take a look at the liberal movement. And so the rural folk are not being pressured by them yet. Once they are, we can make this person the leader and possibly get the rural folk calm down a little bit when we start enacting landed voting. So we now have the coal mines in Scania. There's not much of a demand for coal, so we can create the initial demand here in our urban centers and go to gas streetlights. We'll have a shortage of coal until they hire up. Once we build the glassworks, we can also create a need for that in the market squares. The radical liberal currents in parts of Sweden are causing local revolutionary activity. So plus 20% radicalism in Norrland, or plus 20% in Svealand. I'd rather take it up north there in Norrland. So we can see now the activism of the radical movement is drifting towards 91%. So let's read this first. With a rich harvest in Jutland, with a rich harvest in Gotland, Christopher Wallen has a delivery report, 0 of everything, with a stern ultimatum, a new order that serves the rural folk or mass starvation. Yikes. So we don't want to add 10% to their revolution. We'll get plus 10% trade capacity for 2 years. We'll get that heavy hit to throughput in Gotland. Let's take a look at what's in Gotland. Alright, so we only have 11,000 peasants here, and we don't have any agricultural buildings, so I think we'll take the second option here. All right, so we can see this lowered by 5%. Okay, so we're going to start enacting wealth voting because they are neutral on that. Okay, so now you can see their activism is going to drift down to 25%. So they're at 64% still, but they're going to drift down to 25. And we have railways. Excellent, excellent. Now, in terms of what we're going to be building, after this glassworks, we do want to be able to add stuff for the construction sectors. So we would like to look at building a steel mill. We can always use steel as a production method in the tooling workshops, which will also help us with the construction sectors. We can see here tools are actually a little bit expensive even before we build the next construction sectors. So we will build a steel mill, and then we can get it going with the demand from the tooling workshops. And then what we'll do is the next thing that we build, we will look at possibly doing something for the construction sector, but we would like to get a motor industry going and then build at least one railway in all of our states because we are approaching infrastructure caps. Although we will have a little bit of leeway on that once modern sewage completes. So we don't have to get to the motor industries immediately, which will buy us some time to fix up the prices in the construction sectors. Now, in our trade center here, we're looking at the export of iron. We would like to export iron, even though we need it for the construction sectors. The more we can export, the better it is for our company. And interestingly, we're lacking interest in relevant markets, and the two markets we need are Portugal and Spain. They're in the same strategic region. And we don't have another interest to declare. So it's possible we will look to expand our navy so that we can get another interest, so that we can declare an interest in Iberia to give us added trade advantage on our export of iron. And look at that. You ask and you receive. So they would like to buy clippers off of us, and they want investment rights in us, and in exchange we will get trade privileges. Sure, for only 5 years. Well, should we negotiate this? We have the influence, so we can take a look at negotiating it. We would need another 36. We got rid of these goods transfers. But I'd rather have the goods transfers, to be honest, because that will help us build more construction sectors because it'll give us more money in our budget. So we can always renegotiate this. We'll come back for the investment rights at another time. And we'll do this for 10 years. All right. So we got that. So now we can see we actually are not earning more on treaties than we're getting here. So let's take a look. Okay, so one thing is the coal. We're getting 1.02K and we're buying it for 1.25K. So we'll take a look at that in a second. But we can go to the atmospheric engine pump here. Okay, so we did make coal a little bit more expensive than we needed, which is fine. We'll just build another one. It's always good to have a need for that. And we'll bump it up to the top. Leopold Golich and his supporters have publicly petitioned at a prison in Norland for the release of a pro-wealth voting protester held there on charges of disorderly conduct. So we can get plus 10% enactment success chance and plus 50% pop attraction to the liberal movement. They're at plus 25% right now. We can do this. I would rather not add more radicals right now, so we will take that. You can see we are still at a bit of a deficit for fabric. We can actually start looking at our colonies now to maybe build. We have some people here. We have sulfur here, which we'll use. But in the Niger Delta, we have 30,000 peasants, 40,000 unemployed. So we're going to build 2 cotton plantations there. We have a shortage of fruit, so we'll add a banana plantation. And we're importing a lot of tobacco. We'll get back to that because we want to focus on construction right now. The cotton plantations will help us with construction, and the banana plantations will help us with food security. However, for right now, we don't want to keep that food security for too long. So we'll look at the one with the lowest number of levels, the rye farms in Svealand. And we'll switch to apple orchards for now. So we have a surplus of fruit now. So we'll do this until we get down to these banana plantations, and then we can switch it back. We can see too in our barracks, we have an input goods shortage of artillery. We don't want to get too sidetracked from continuing construction, but possibly after the banana plantation, we'll just get at least one arms industry and one artillery factory going. So I believe we don't have either yet. Oh, we have one arms, so we'll get one artillery going, and then continue to expand construction. All right, law progressed to consideration. All right, now we have the Hungry 40s. An outbreak of crop disease in Kursk has begun to spread across much of the European continent. With a failed harvest looming, fears of famine have begun to circle. So we can get some trade advantage on imports, which is nice. And we can cut the percentage of throughput, the hit to throughput on those industries, if for 2 years we add 500 pounds of government expenses, so we will do that. The Swedish American Fellowship has offered us an opportunity to establish a foreign investment rights agreement with the United States of America. The lobby has offered to use their connections to smooth the negotiating process. Sure, we'll take that. We'll look into it. A group of students attending the university in Scania have arranged a demonstration in support of the liberal movement. The display has inspired other students to join the cause. So we'll add more pop attraction to the liberal movement. So we'll lose 10% on university building throughput, but we only have 2 so far. So now would be the time to take something like that. Although 5% of academic pops become more radical. Like I said, we don't want more radicals, but I have a suspicion this is actually a very small number of people. Yeah, so we only have 1.67 thousand academic pops, so that would be a pretty small number. So we'll take this. Oh, and I believe also that just said in Scania. So even better. So the Portuguese are building a coal mine for us at the same time. So we'll have 3 levels of coal mine, which will be nice. All right, law progressed to assent. The effort at a liberal revolution led by radical leaders in Sweden has been suppressed by the powers that be, reasserting their power and pushing the radicals into obscurity. So get plus 25 legitimacy, or we can gain 10% more loyalists. Now we can gain 25 legitimacy. We could do something like this where we put the industrialists or the intelligentsia in there. If we put the intelligentsia in there, we would be at 8 for legitimacy. So we could bump ourselves up to an unacceptable government. If we put the industrialists in, we could get ourselves up to 46. It would be the same thing, unacceptable government. I would like to get the number of radicals down though. So instead of doing this, we will take the plus 10% of pops in Sweden become more loyalist. You can see the big jump our loyalists and radicals just made from decreasing radicals and increasing loyalists there. Okay, so you can see we now have 3 levels of coal mine. Actually, there's another one being built, interestingly. Yes, because we still need some more coal. So the metals company, yes, is doing it. We actually should also put our other coal mines up for sale to get throughput bonus. Hopefully a foreign power doesn't buy them. Right, so they're not selling immediately, so we'll wait on that. We'll check back in a little bit. We now have modern sewage. So we'll take a look at that in a moment, but let's read this. In an obscure meeting, Leopold Gulrich, and a proxy of the industrialists, rambled at length about the positives of wealth voting. One was cognizant enough to take minutes. Okay, so we get political strength and pop attraction to the rural folk and industrialists. This is good. And now you'll notice we don't have springtime of the peoples anymore. So we don't really need wealth voting. And we're going to be really sneaky. We're going to stop enacting that. So now we would like to go to census suffrage or universal suffrage. Census suffrage favors literate pops. Universal suffrage gives an equal vote to everybody. But ultimately, we would rather go for universal suffrage now that we don't have springtime of the peoples. So we'll go for that. All right, Central Archives. So now we can go to the next production method in the government admin buildings. This will add 390 bureaucracy, which will give us a bonus to state construction efficiency, which we're going to need in a little bit when we're building in our colonies. However, we're going to need more paper, and at the moment, paper's a little expensive. However, in our paper mill, we can go to the next production method, which is sulfite pulping. Problem is, we don't really have any sulfur in our market, but we do have a sulfur mine in Western Norway. And it hasn't hired because there's no need for it. So what we're going to do, we're going to go to the standardized filing system. We will have more of a need for paper. And so here, we'll go to sulfite pulping. And now sulfur. Okay, and so we're going to put a large tariff on the import because we'd rather get it from the market here and leave our trade capacity for our exports here. Oh, and we forgot to check back before. We now have a good trade advantage because of the trade privileges we got with Portugal. So we'll unpause here. And now, yes, and now we can see the sulfur mines are going to higher up here in Norway. Leopold Gulrich's rhetoric has drawn negative attention to the representatives of the landowners, who he has condemned for obstructing the passage of universal suffrage. Well, we'll get -2 approval from the landowners. They're at -13, but they're always going to be upset about this. So we'd rather take the plus 10%. Though we will get, with this, you get more activism from the radical movement, who are not on the list. Oh, that's right. Yeah, well. So we will take the plus 10%. Okay, and we can see our private sector is building us that railway in Svealand. It's possible we can subsidize it and get the private sector to build a motor industry. And we don't really need more infrastructure since we got modern sewage. So we get +1 for each 100,000 population. Population's at 1.08 million. And so we are getting 10.89 infrastructure just from modern sewage. All right, law progress to consideration. Now the additional 2 construction sectors are done, so let's take a look here. So we can use more iron, but remember we haven't added the atmospheric engine pump yet. So we will add that now. We once again have a surplus of iron. So now iron's pretty cheap, logging's pretty cheap, and it's the tools that are a little expensive. So we'll bump the tools ahead of this additional tooling workshop, and then we'll finish out the rest of these buildings, and then we'll add more to the construction sectors. Equatorial Bantu students sometimes use their native language in Swedish schools. Some have called for teachers to penalize the use of these languages, forcing children to speak the official language of Sweden. So we can increase assimilation, though the Equatorial Bantu population are in our colonies, so they're living in their homelands. Until we promote national values, they won't assimilate. And we can't promote national values till we get nationalism. And it will be probably about 5 years before we get it. So we'll actually choose this one. It'll give us a -10% to assimilation, but they can't assimilate anyway. But we'll decrease radicalism there. We'll lose 2 approval from the petite bourgeoisie, but it looks like that'll still keep them very happy. All right, we got general staff on tech spread, excellent. And we're getting joint stock companies on tech spread, also very excellent. So we really want to finish out level 2 of the production tech here so that we can get to open hearth process. Prominent members of the intelligentsia, outspoken supporters of universal suffrage, and close allies of Jacob de Lagarde have been exposed in a corruption scandal, having exchanged political favors for personal gifts. So we're in the second phase. We don't have any setbacks, but taking a setback here won't add to our success chance, so we don't necessarily want to take that. We have a surplus of bureaucracy, so we can lose 5% for 5 years. That's not so bad. Instead of losing 15% success chance, we'll lose the 10% instead. We'll take this. All right, so it looks like we're no longer improving relations with people, which means we should have pretty good relations. We have a lot of influence. So let's try to get some trade privileges and maybe sell some goods. looks like they would like to take hardwood. Oh yeah, well, something I always forget, when you're trying to get trade privileges, adding goods transfers suddenly makes the trade privileges negative. We can give them investment rights, and we've given away quite a bit, actually. We could owe an obligation. So if we're going to do that, then I would like to get a little bit more. Well, we can, actually, we could buy fabric off of them, which wouldn't be so bad. Buy 150 units. And actually, we could buy grain to depress the cost of grain. And then we'll go back to selling them. We'll sell them 65 units of hardwood. All right, so we have this deal. And this will be one I would look to do for 15 years, not the full 25. So we have a 20% chance. If we owe an obligation, it'll definitely go through. But we might as well then just roll the dice and see if that 20% chance hits. If not, we'll come back with the obligation, but we'll get fabric off of them and we'll get grain, and then we'll sell some of the excess hardwood that we have. Look at that, and it worked. We didn't have to give the obligation. And now we have a much better price of fabric. The livestock ranches will take a little bit of a hit, but we can start utilizing some of the fertilizer they make. And honestly, if the livestock ranches, the main reason we needed them was for fabric anyway. With that deal, we now have a reliable source for all of our construction goods. We were okay in terms of construction goods a good while before this, but with not having cotton plantations in our core states and our colonies still growing, a good source of fabric completes the input cycle. We are now ready to expand the construction sectors much further in the next episode. I find the hardest part of the first 10 years of the game is patience. Construction is an exponential system, and the initial setup is vital in terms of sustainability, especially when you're a country starting off with only one construction sector, like Sweden is. The landowners are no longer powerful since their political clout is under 20%. The industrialists are climbing the rankings. This is vital in the first 10 years since the laws the landowners prefer are generally not productive. We also have our trade center set up well in terms of trade advantage, most notably the exports of iron and hardwood. The trade advantage for our export of iron will help make our company profitable, and the export of hardwood will make our logging camps profitable in the early game since it's such an abundant resource in Sweden. Logging becomes less profitable as the game goes on, so we want to capitalize on this resource now before the worldwide tech spread makes it more and more obsolete. If you found this video helpful, please consider giving it a like and the channel a subscribe. Every time you do, I figure out another way to mispronounce the name Svealand. With apologies. That's it for now. As always, be awesome.